Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tech Friday right here on twitch.tv/DC Lasair. And today, my guest is the amazing Lady Luck34. Mandy, if you would introduce yourself to the
Yeah.
peoples.
To the people. Hello, everyone. I am Mandy. I go by Lady Luck 34 around the internet. I do stream things like currently obsessively playing Detective Pikachu Returns, but also other games, crafty things, sewing, crochet, now dice making. Also, now like decorative planning and journaling. That's a recent addition. And all the things. But yes, hi. And then I'm show up occasionally around the internet, clipping things in people's channels, and getting tagged into the random one shot. Oh, and my
Yeah.
pronouns are she, her.
Woohoo. All right. And thank you, Panda, for the raid. Appreciate that. Hello, everyone coming in. If you are new here to my channel, I am DC. You can find me Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, all the places, DC Lasair, !DC in my chat gets you to dclasair.bio.link for all my things. You may be wondering about the hat. I am in the PCRF fundraiser, which I forgot to put the little tracker thing up above my head here, so I will do that in a moment. But if you donate using that link, every $20, I will add a new hat to my head. $50, you get one-on-one time with me to talk about production and OBS or whatever you need to help yourself streaming. I'm leaning over to pet my cat because my cat is meowing a lot.
The moment that you go live is when pets are like, "But I want your attention
But
now."
I need your attention. I clearly don't get enough of it during the day.
Anybody who sees my when I'm doing crafty things streams where it's like guaranteed, I'm like, "Let me do my intro things, and then we'll get started." And as Susie shows up, hey, hey, she's kind of curled up down there. You can sort of see her.
All right. So if you want, let's get started off while I take care of my cat a bit here and get the widget thingy up above us so everyone can keep track of that. We have a handy checklist.
We do.
Made a notion, and I know that a lot of times I see you when I'm watching your streams. You are very organized. You go, okay, I've laid this out, and I put this here with this thing, and I use this. And yeah, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you organize yourself for, I don't know, maybe various streams. I know the sewing stream is one where you have a bunch of things, and hey, Susie.
Yeah. For people, crafts are always a little bit of a. They can get out of hand real quickly, as those of you that might be here can see visually behind me in regards to just the sheer amount of stuff. And so, especially when I think about on stream, most notably, because obviously there's people there, they can see it. It's a little bit of being like, okay, what am I working on? Where am I at in that project? What are the things I think I'm going to need tonight? And I'm not always perfect at it, but I've started to kind of like build that skill set because it's a habit. Like it's things that you, as you get through it, you're like, oh, I need this. I didn't think I would need this. And so as I've kind of gone on my crafting journey, depending on what project and what it is, sewing I think is a little more convoluted because you need more little things. But like I have project boxes now where it's like, oh, this project's a work in progress. Here's a box with all the things related to it in one place that I pull them out of when I'm working on it, and then I pack them back in when I'm done. Because keeping track of stuff is hard.
And is that
Um,
the basic process for like dice making and video games, all that, or?
yeah, I think I live in an apartment, and like this space here behind me and to my side is where I do crochet. It's where I do sewing. It's where I do some of the dice making and what have you. And so what that means is it kind of has to be flexible. And I wouldn't quite call it modular, but I basically need to be able to say if I'm doing more than one at a time or I'm like have multiple projects in a row, um, like, okay, well, if I need to use this other table for dice making, that means the sewing machine has to go out of the way. That means all the project pieces can't also be on that table or I'll have no space. So it's very much a like, I've gotten better as I've added more things in or as I have multiple projects running at one time to be like, I have a bin or I have a basket or I have a bag where everything for this project goes. And so then it's kind of like, I get to kind of convert my table from one to the other based on what I'm going to be doing, where it's like, okay, I'm pulling out sewing. I have a bin over here that's where all the dice stuff goes. So everything for dice gets closed up, properly stored, thrown into that single bin. It goes onto its shelf, and then I can pull out the sewing machine and say, what project am I working on, and pull those out. And I wasn't great at this at the beginning. um, so it's kind of it's interesting because I think this applies to tech too, which is that it becomes an evolution of what do I need and what will help me do this better or more smoothly or with less stress. And so I've kind of like reorganized several times where I go like, okay, I need to shift how I do this. And here's the place that trips me up the most. How could I potentially solve for that? And not all of them work. Some are better than others. But I've definitely got into a place where it's a much more cohesive process for me to be able to say like for like I don't know the first 4 to 6 weeks of dice making, all of my supplies went into the cardboard shipping box that they showed up in because I had nowhere to put them and I was just moving it to different tables around my apartment when I needed it out of the way. And then finally, over the holidays, I sat down and was like, I need to just clean this whole space up because I've, let it get away from me while I was quilting and then started dice making and all these things. And once I did and got everything a little organized, I ended up opening up space in one of the bins that I had sitting around and was like, okay, all the dice stuff can go in here. And now it has a home on the shelf so that rather than it being out and in my way when I'm not using it, I can put it here. So it evolves, and I don't always stay as on top of it as I could be, but I definitely like when it gets really out of hand, I'm like, all right, I'm taking this weekend to clean everything and go through all my stuff and make sure the projects I'm working on are organized because otherwise it turns into a disaster and then I start losing pieces of projects. So trying to find like a fabric because you can't find your sleeve that you were about to sew on, not fun. Or kind of fun, but probably not enjoyable.
Yeah, see, I'm like, I need dice. Well, here's some dice I found over here. Oh, these just go on my desk over here now, and that's my organization. Which leads to a messy desk. Because now there's a lot of things that have claimed space on the desk.
It's funny because I can't, well, I don't know, on the streams, everybody can kinda see sometimes it's organized, but it's a organized chaos is maybe how
Hmm.
I would put it. And I certainly like, I'm looking at my desk right now, which you cannot see the bulk of, and it is a bit of a mess, probably because I bought a bunch of stuff back from Aresia and just threw it on here and was like, "I'll get to you eventually." But I try to build homes, like reorganize my shelves and my space and what have you, and build homes for my things so that ideally um, it helps me like mentally and from a like staying on top of stuff process to be like, here's where you go when I'm not using you. And then when I want it or I need it, I know exactly where to go to get it. Which is like y'all can't see it very well, but by Susie, there's like some red and green down here. That's my toolkit. And it's like, all right, cool. My toolkit. This is like my legit like home improvement toolkit. It's always there. I don't move it except for when I take it out to get things and use it. And then everything goes back. So anytime I'm like, I need a hammer, I need a measuring tape, I'm about to try and completely reorganize this entire room, and I got to make sure everything will fit where I want to put it, I know exactly where to go to get it. And I think that that's oftentimes very helpful for just, I guess, reducing the mental load for anything you're doing, but especially when you're trying to do stuff and stream it at the same time.
Now you're organized, you're ready to go, but you have to set up for various things still. So you've done your pre-setup with the organization. Now you have to do the setup for things. Let's talk about the sewing setup first. Well, what tech do you use? Like you have more than one camera, so where do you
Yep.
position that? How do you find a good angle for your sewing machine, what to use in that stuff. And
It's funny. Please keep going. Sorry.
and
Distract.
if it's similar to your dice making, we can just kind of smash those together.
Um, I would say probably actually that the sewing is more complicated. Dice making, we're still young in our dice making journey. So I'm still learning and evolving how I do different things, and it's changed a lot. But oftentimes, you organize, and I've had to get better. I'm not the best at it, but I've had to get better at planning what content I'm going to do that particular day. Like, what am I going to sew? Am I cutting fabric? What are the things I'm doing? Because that's going to determine which of the cameras I set up, where I set them up, how I have to move the light around my room. So context here, all of this light that you see is all artificial light. This particular room in the apartment that I live in does not have a lot of built-in lighting. And the ceilings are very high, which makes everything more difficult. And so like I'm constantly shifting. You all see it on stream sometimes where I'm like, oh, that's not good. Let me move this light off to the side. But it's like I have 3 cameras. The camera we have here, yeah, I'll say like 80% of the time stays on my monitor. Occasionally, when you get the camera view that's directly to, I don't know how well you all can see the flannel in the background on the wall, but directly in this direction, where I'll like turn and talk to it. That's when I move this camera onto a tripod with like wires everywhere and set it up to have a better face cam. But the long of this is okay. I have the Logitech StreamCam. That's sitting on a little baby tripod that's like 6 inches tall. Um, Usually on the corner of this desk, pointing at the table next to us where the sewing machine is. And I found that that's like seems to be the best overall view to kind of like see the sewing in motion. And then I have a second, or not a second, I have a Logitech C920, which is the first webcam I bought when I was just streaming gaming at the beginning, that moves around. It has been on a ring light. It has been on the tripod. It is currently attached to a boom arm that's facing downwards for a top-down view of the table and the sewing machine. And so anytime that you've seen me, for example, like cutting at the table cutting, I've probably put that on the mini, like half-size tripod ring light and set that up on the edge of the table and pointed it down so you all can see the cutting as I'm cutting fabric. So all of those have to move based on what I'm doing that day. And and then the lighting to go with it. So like ring light, I have a Litra beam. I have 3 different lights that I move around this room and turn on or off, trying to get decent lighting. Because I don't have a modular setup. I would love one day to get like, the giant like frames where you can slide everything around. That would be amazing. Also never going to happen. But in the interim, I'm doing a lot of how long is this camera's cable? Do I need an extension? Can I place it somewhere and get light that's not caught on in frame? How will this show the cutting or the fabric or the stitches on the sewing? You see it all the time where I'll be like, look at this. And like, you all can't see it. Let me turn to the other side and maybe you can see the stitching. I did that with one of the quilts. So there's a lot of that. Of like having to get creative in how you move and how you place things and then trying different stuff. Like I don't know if the top down camera is really going to work, but I'm trying it and it gets that camera kind of out of the way because the biggest challenge I think in doing all of this with sewing is all of your equipment can't get in the way of the machines and the fabric. So like when I was doing my most recent quilt on stream, at one point, I had my little baby tripod with the stream cam on the same table as the sewing machine because I was sewing all of the little blocks. And it's tiny pieces of fabric, and it's fine. They're right there. They don't even fall off of the machine while I'm sewing. They're so small, relatively speaking. And the moment I was like, time to start stitching the whole quilt together, it was like, yep, guess what? Camera has to move back onto the desk, like a foot back from that because Otherwise, the tripod is in the way of the fabric as I'm sewing, and I'm just gonna either knock the camera off the table, or we're gonna get a really, really comedic experience here. Um, so like dice making is not quite so complicated because it doesn't technically take up as much room in the same way. That one's more of a challenge because you're trying to do all of the technology stuff and the making with safety gear on, which is like stream cam is great because I can press a button. It doesn't matter whether I'm wearing gloves or not.
Right. Uh,
Or the stream deck. I can't even word.
so you mentioned the cameras and the lights, and now when you're lighting, you have, we can see you pretty good, and we can see what you're showing pretty good. So you're just, how many lights are you using, and what and kind of where are
Yeah.
they? And
Um, so most of the time what you all are seeing are 2 to 3 primary lights. Over the machine, I do have the Leacher beam set up so that it's kind of pointing down at the machine. And then I have 2 just other kind of generic standing lights, um, one on each side of the room that I'm typically turning on, adjusting brightness, and moving around to try and get a little bit more ambient light. Um, the other thing is I have a little LED strip that's also on the sewing machine, but that's primarily for me, so I can see better what I'm doing. Because one of the challenges with lighting is lighting that's really good for the viewers to see everything that's going on is more about having that wider kind of ambient light for the space, which is not, especially because I'm usually streaming in the evenings. It's nighttime, it's already dark. This room doesn't get any light even during the daytime. Like, uh, so sometimes it's like, all right, y'all, this lighting is going to look bad for you, but I need it for me to see what I'm doing because, especially, some of them can be very small details. Um, which is an adventure. And I keep looking at trying to set up some different lighting, which might be like the next step that I take in terms of like what do I want to evolve next. And I have like here I have the Litra Glow. So again, trying to make sure there's a good enough like backlighting that everything looks
Mhm.
okay. Gaming streams are sometimes like, what was it, Resident Evil, or I'm like, we're just gonna be in darkness and I'm gonna look like a monster on camera because the reward for donation for that one was that I would play in the dark. So
Good stream
lighting is
times.
yeah, lighting is probably my biggest challenge, though I will admit that I've started going back and saving some of my VODs to like look at them in more detail, and it's
Mhm.
not as bad on the VOD as I think it is during the stream.
Right?
So,
You're
so in
usually doing
fairness,
better than you think you are. So
exactly. Where I was like, "Oh, I was sure none of this detail would show up." And I'm like, "Clearly it's because I have 2 monitors and they're both on a mount that can
Mhm.
shift and turn and everything. And so when I stream, so that I can see chat and like see OBS and things, I actually tilt one so it's facing the sewing machine, but it's still like, okay, now it's a little bit further away because I'm sitting the next table over and everything's in different sizes so I can get as much onto that one screen as I need to be keeping track of. And so my actual video looks really small and I just assume nobody can see what I'm trying to point out. Turns out that's not the case. So watch your VODs afterwards to see if like, oh, did this thing I was talking about work or was it visible or what have you? So that's probably going to be something I'll try to get better at just to figure out the things that work best.
Quick plug for me, because it's my channel. If you go to my YouTube, I do have a video on lighting yourself and things like that. So you go there, subscribe, you can find the video on lighting.
And I will say, anybody who's watched at least a couple, especially when I'm quilting, that's usually the worst of it. I have knocked over my cameras. I've knocked over my tripods with lights. One I like accidentally threw off the table, and I felt really bad because I was trying to like recover it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, video looks really bad. I should have gone to BRB, but um, it's a journey. You get better at it over time as you
Mhm.
figure out what's working for you. I just keep changing the things I do or needing different angles for, when I started, I didn't have the table to cut on, so I never did cutting on stream. So like once I added that, it was like, oh crap, now I got to figure out how to show this. So basically, things will evolve over time and you'll get better at it, I promise. And also, definitely leverage all of DC's knowledge about setting things up because it helps. Plug for you.
Yay, plug. The sewing machine you use, because surprise, sewing machines are tech, and so are scissors and measuring tape and all that technology. You mentioned the challenge of just space. Do you wish you had a different sewing machine that you could angle better, or does this one just fit the need and it's okay? I know nothing about sewing machines, so your expertise is everything we have.
Perfect. You all are stuck with me now. No, actually, I like my sewing machines. I think it's more about I have 2, by the way. Um, I think it's more about the space. So I'm in an apartment. This is all of my crafty space, but it's also other things. So I have relatively limited amount of space that has to be functional in multiple ways. Which means that like sometimes you watch organization videos of people at their sewing rooms, and I'm like, it's because you live in a house and you have a giant like 20 by 15 size room, which I don't have. I have to like it's a little bit of a comedy occasionally when I've been doing some of the quilts, is because when I have the table and then the sewing table, which is partially closed right now, it's folding, it's great. That like I actually end up in this little teeny tiny like triangle where I'm tripping over cords and I'm tripping over my chair, but it's like all the space I have between the different things I need to reach, which is the sewing machine, the ironing board, and the cutting space with my. And so as a result, um I like my sewing machines, but they do different things. So I have 2. They're both singers. One is a heavy duty 4411, which is the one I use for most stuff. The heavy duty just means it's heavier in general, but it's also mechanically set up to be able to stitch through more layers of fabric. So it'll do better for thicker, heavier fabrics like denim or leather. And it handles from a quilting standpoint going through, like 6, 7, 8 layers of fabric a little bit easier than my other machine, which is a Singer Stylus 7258, which is it's interesting because the 7258 would probably be defined as like a higher grade. It's computerized, so I just press buttons and it does the things. It has more stitches. It has a couple of nice little like additional features, but it's not meant to like stitch through. And I have definitely made my life more challenging by saying, "Hey, I'll just do the finishing touches on this machine for the quilt," and that comes back to bite me. Whereas the heavy duty, the 4411, is mechanical, so it's there's no buttons. It's a lot of switches and dials and things, and um, so I think and also everybody's watched me like botch something on stream and have to like cut a bunch of thread and I keep a little like a screwdriver stuff around so I can open it up and be like, what did I do? And try and fix it in that moment so I can keep going.
All right. And welcome in, Pirate. And Pirate's question: what? You don't have a huge house you got in a divorce to use as a craft space?
This is a reference because somebody I met at Aresia is exactly that. They're like, I have a 3-story house that I got in the divorce. And she's like, my entire top floor, or like the second floor is all just fabric. And in my mind, I'm going like, this is wild. How does this happen in real life? If only. Yeah, to your point, like sewing machines, it's interesting because I definitely think I would potentially have a different machine if I was buying a new one right now, like trading mine in and buying something that like I have a better idea of what are the things that are most helpful and useful to me. But eh, it's fine.
It's fine.
This is what happens when you're in. It's fine. Everything is fine. Don't worry about that. Um, but like I don't think they're bad. They just meet different needs the same way that like having different cameras will do different things for you, and some are just higher higher more features, maybe slightly better materials. Yeah, you all have a Susie in the background now. She's gonna just get into something. Um, I think the biggest thing is like with the organizing, it's that I have spaces for where they go when I'm not using them, or when I need them out of the way. And sometimes that space is like you're just going on the floor right next to the table. But like I do actually what? You can't hear her. She's whining at me now. Um, but yeah, so that's like an interesting mechanical thing where I'm like, okay, is my camera gonna work? Is my light gonna work? Am I gonna have to bust out some tools to mess with the sewing machine in the middle of stream? Sometimes yes.
And I am part of the PCRF donation thing that Cypher set up. So if you can donate, do that. Every $20 donation gets another hat added to my head. I will wear these through Monday. So keep those
And if
donations in. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and if they donate, I have headbands and my own hat that probably will not fit very well over this headset, but I would try.
Excellent.
Uh,
So get us
so
both
I
to
will join
wear
you.
things.
Exactly. Um, but yeah, so I don't know. Sewing, it's funny you say that. Like all of those things are equipment. There's obviously a lot of little things, and then there's like the bigger stuff. Like I point to table that I have that I do my cutting on now because it folds.
Hmm.
Um, and that's so nice because it's like, yes, oh my god, dog. Being able to like open it up when I need it for stuff and then close it down and roll it against the wall and have space. And it's not a lot of space, I should say, too, to be clear. Um, I will selfishly post this video in chat
Oh yeah, do the thing.
because I was waiting for this quilt to arrive at its final recipient before I posted. But I took a short video when I was putting the quilt sandwich together to be like, the table is open. Here's what it looks like, which is that y'all can't see it because it's directly behind me. There is a random pillar, a load bearing pillar in this room, like a foot and a half off of the wall. So like I have a pillar to one side. I have just like maybe max like 6 inches clearance when I open the table all the way between the pillar and the wall. So it's like this comedy of like, how do you make a small space work, especially when you're doing stuff like trying to stream it, because all of that equipment takes up space. Like if I want to have the tripod somewhere, if I want to have the ring light somewhere, even the boom arm is like, okay, like it moves around, but it still has to, like, if you want to fold it back, that means you need clearance behind the table,
Hmm.
or you just folding it into my poor walls. It's fine, but like,
Your walls take the hit for you to stream.
listen, I've like tried my best now to be like, let's give myself extra clearance from the wall when I'm doing stuff. Um, but yeah, it's a thing.
All right. So you've started another hobby recently, dice making,
Yes,
which you just great looking dice.
thank you. I didn't need another hobby, but I got one.
So I'm guessing the table setup is similar to what you do with sewing, or
For the most part, I've been trying like different, where do I want to set the camera? So I try to
hmm.
have the stream cam on the little baby tripod, like on the table with it, so you can kind of see stuff happening, whether I'm popping stuff out or not. Um, Kind of depends on what I'm, because I've done a few where I'm like we're mixing and making dice, or mixing resin, pouring them in, making the dice, or we're busting them out of the mold and looking at them, and then we're painting them. And so you kind of want a combination of being able to have a little bit more up close, which is a whole, photos and video and lighting for dice, totally different need. Where I'm like, you all get, I swear it looks good. You're not getting the detail, but it does. Um, and I actually don't think I've done any dice making since I moved, because this was a recent move, a little earlier this month. Moved the boom arm to try and do a top down view. So that's something I'm actually interested to try with the dice making, to see like, okay, for you to see me moving all the things around, the different cups with resin, the colors, what have you, when you're actually mixing. So it's similar-ish, where the way that I have things set up now works for both. Whether it's the best setup for dice making, I'm still in the learning process there, since that's a new-ish hobby. Um, so I think like there are ways where you can like build a setup that works for multiple things. It just becomes okay, well, if I do it this way, the things that are moving are all of the supplies rather than the equipment. And that's two different ways to go about using your space.
Right. And I see you with various molds, and you're pouring resin. I'm sure you have that all organized somewhere too in various spots.
I do, I do. Um, so right now, it's funny too because dice is interestingly flexible because you don't need, technically, unless I'm streaming it, I don't need any equipment. Um, in terms of the actual dice making. So I have more than once gone and set up on what like a little table I have by the kitchen where I'm like, oh, well, I want to be out here because it's by windows and sunlight. And actually, one of the streams I did of dice making over the, I think it was over the holidays, so over the break, I moved my laptop out there, which is what I use for the streaming from the Switch and the PlayStation. And I think I grabbed it. It might have been the C20 920 that I grabbed it and was like, this is the one dice that I can move around because I think it was on the ring light at that point. And I literally was like, unplug the camera, unplug the ring light on its little tripod, go set it up. Both of those can plug into the laptop. And I was like, all I got to do is tilt it down so you get the table and I can stream making the dice in this room. I don't know that that's the best way to go about doing things. Most people like to have a nice consistent setup, and I'm like, no, I'm just gonna move all of my equipment. Um,
You need your own
but yeah,
AV cart.
like I'd say I've transitioned the dice stuff where I have a little, I say little, it's a pretty hefty bin where most of everything fits in that. And so then I can basically like, oh, I'm gonna do my dice making. I pull it out, I lay all the stuff out, and I can get to making. And then that's flexible enough that I can do it here, which is my more regular craft setup. Um, but if I want to be silly and set up at my kitchen table and on a random day, the only thing that has to move is, or the only thing that's more work, I should say, not the same amount of work, is the camera and potentially lighting, and then the laptop. But the laptop's flexible, so it's a laptop. That's what they're for.
And you would recommend not drinking the resin, right?
Don't drink the resin.
Don't drink the resin is not snack food. Okay. Got it.
No.
Clear. Putting that on my checklist.
Is this like don't eat the
XPS foam. Yeah.
EVA foam?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't eat the foam. Don't drink the resin.
But looks so
Um,
colorful and tasty.
Oh my god, when Susie like comes over to the table when I'm doing this, I'm just like, because I'm wearing the gloves and I've touched everything, I'm like elbowing her where I'm like, Susie, don't come any closer. This is bad for you.
Oh no.
Luckily that she's gotten a little better. She learns over time where she's like, oh, you don't want my attention when you're doing this thing. Um, So she's gotten a little better about it, but she will always, without fail, show up at the like it's showing up the very beginning of stream where I'm like, okay, before I've actually started making something, she will show up and want attention. So she does that with like, oh, you're setting up for dice making, you should be petting me right now. But once we really get into it, she's now learned to like, oh no, I shouldn't mess with that. So pets,
Excellent.
you know?
And you pour the resin in a silicone mold. Is that right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
you press it down and you leave it for what, about 24 hours?
hmm I'd say the average is 24 hours. There are different types of like resins that might cure faster. And then there's obviously UV resin, which you can do with the light. Um, and yeah, then it's like, so I would say I generally for like one dice set, if I'm not rushing myself, which I'm trying to get better about like not being impatient, it's probably 45 minutes to an hour to actually do all of the measuring, mixing the colors, pouring it into the mold, having it all like have it set, let bubbles rise out and everything. And then yeah, pour it into mold, let it sit there for 24 hours and then come out and bust it all out. I was gonna say it's the one nice thing about like dice making where it's like you spend a dedicated hour doing it and then
Hmm.
you get to ignore it for 24 hours. It's like basically it's like a nice little thing where like for the first week it was literally like, okay, in the evening at like 8 o'clock, I'll bust out the old set, take a look at them, and then I'll mix and put the new set in. And then that just means like an hour later, the next day. And I was kind of doing it. And then I was finally like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to let this one go. Like I'll bust out the set in the evening, and then I'll wait until the morning to mix the new one. And I'll start that cycle of it being like an hour later each time. From the morning instead. And so it's like other projects are like, oh, I need to keep working on it so I can finish it or what have you. And this is like, nope, you do it, you put it into the mold, and then you ignore it.
Excellent. And I believe I saw you play with fire before with the dice.
Yes, there's also fire.
There's also fire.
So
what are
that's
you doing there?
That's to get the cleanest look in your dice, you want to remove as much air from the resin as possible. And the resin that bubbles naturally occur when you're stirring and mixing in your coloring or anything else, like if you put foil or something in. And so it's a combination of you're letting the bubbles of air rise, and then they'll usually be sitting at the top, and you take a lighter or something to them to try and pop those quickly. Um, if you let them sit long enough, they would probably naturally disperse on their own. But once you start mixing the resin, you're kind of on a limited timetable before it'll start to harden on its own. So you can't just like let it sit for 3 hours uh and then start pouring it. And like people who are very fancy with this use like little heat guns and things like that that are maybe not quite as dangerous as fire. But for the beginner newbies like me, I'm like, listen, I got a little lighter that I use for candles and stuff. It'll work for this need.
Yeah, that's fire. It works.
Exactly. It's a little fire. It's perfectly fine.
And then once you get the dice, it's been 24 hours, you get them out. I see you and a lot of people fill in the numbers on the die with what are you using to do that typically too?
So I have acrylic paints, which are kind of the most common way to do it, and also a couple acrylic paint pens. So depends on what your like level of interest is. There's other things you can use there. It doesn't have to be acrylic paint. That's just kind of the easiest, the most accessible, what most people use. Um, I mean, you could be like, that's a. I learned. I did not know you can buy dice with no inked numbers on them because the assumption is you're going to ink them yourself. I did not know that. I thought it was an aesthetic choice to not have the numbers inked. So I think this was PAX Unplugged in 22. I show up and I'm like, oh, I can't read these as we're on stage playing a game of Into the Motherlands. And they're like, why is there no ink on them? Like, because they didn't come with ink. And everyone's like, you didn't paint them? I was like, I thought it was a deliberate choice. They're like, no, it's so you can paint it yourself, whatever color you want. So I learned that, and when I finally got my kit and started doing dice making, the very first thing that I did from it, painting or inking numbers was actually inking numbers on dice sets I already had that I had purchased.
Excellent.
So yes, welcome to not knowing what you're doing, but somehow managing.
I don't know, all the dice we see you make look fantastic, so
Thank
I think you have an idea what you're doing.
you. I'm trying.
So we're gonna transition a bit. Do you want to say anything else about your crafting setups or anything we haven't covered yet before we?
Um, I can't remember because I'm looking at the list now. I forget. So you can tell me if I'm getting ahead of myself. Are we going to be talking about what next later on?
We're gonna go into your setup for video games,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I think the only other thing is that like I would just say setups evolve over time. Like when I started, I only had one camera. So
Mhm.
I had a whole adventure where I was like, well, I want to film crocheting. How would I do that? And it was just as I naturally was like, well, I want to have a different camera angle, or I don't want to have to move my camera, which jokes on me because I do that a lot now. Um, and it was like, oh, okay, I'll buy a second one. And so like it's ever evolving. It's ever unless you're transparently wanting to do the sort of thing where you're like, I'm going to sit in front of my computer and I don't need to move anything. Once it's good, it's good. But for me, because I keep adding more hobbies, and changing like constantly, I've reorganized, and I say reorganized, I mean like completely cleaned, moved all the furniture out, picked different places. Like this setup is not where this computer was a year ago. Because I move everything. I'm like, oh, this isn't working for what I want right now. Let me try moving everything again. And then subsequently we'll go, this is not working for me right now. Let me move everything again. So I always think about like technology and stuff. It's like it'll evolve. And as you find like need states of like, hey, I do want a second camera, or I do want different lighting. That's something you do naturally over time. As you find a need, you start to fill it.
All
So
right.
that's my low way of saying like I'm sure my setup will change soon again, just because I
Just
know who
because.
I am. I know who I am.
We're always looking for things that will help us do our thing better, and hopefully we can afford them. Uh,
It's it's funny because I was thinking about this in advance of us talking, that I was like, you know, between like the three different cameras, and I have different like mics and things. I'm using a headset and stuff right now, but like um if I had just been at the same spot for the what I paid for them, I probably could have gotten myself like a pretty decent, like not a super super nice, but like a decent good camera or a decent good mic or something if I'd started there. I'm like, but the reality of that first moment where you're like, what, how do I want to start? And then you look at something with a what feels like a hefty price tag when you haven't done
mhm.
anything yet, and you go, "Oh no." So so it's funny to me because I look at all of this and I'm like, the numbers net out, but it's what I've done over the course of 4 years,
Mhm.
5 years. So it's not like I'm taking that hit at one time. And like, if I only had one camera, I couldn't do some of the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
my setup is 3 years of investment in various things. Yeah,
and it's like it changes where,
yeah.
I don't love when I'm sewing to have my headset on, but I also know that's because the the audio solutions that I was using before, which were like the other mics and stuff, where they would work, but they weren't meant for me to be moving around a room or going like moving 3 feet to iron something. And so they were kind of less than ideal. And as much as it like frustrates me because I'd rather not be wearing a headset while I'm sewing and like hunched over like a goblin, um, that works out to being a better solution for everyone. And then eventually I will evolve my setup to maybe I'll have we've talked about it several times, a lav mic or something.
Mhm.
In which case, then I can ditch the headset and, you know, move on. And it's just like, what do you need at any given time? And that'll change as what you're doing changes, or as your resources change, or as you work to improve. That
Alright.
mic.
We'll have Mike someday. The dream. Uh,
The dream.
the dream.
Well, it's like this is the other thing too, which I think is interesting. You do all the tech stuff, so obviously, like which is that jump from the kind of like easy to understand um, things. Like, okay, I need a webcam. Cool, I can just walk into a Best Buy and buy one.
Mhm.
With from like super super cheap to like a decent, pretty good one. And then if you wanted to go up into things like a DSLR, there's some options there. Maybe not like all of or the best options, but you could walk into like a big box store like a Best Buy and get some things. Same thing with a mic. Like over time, some of that equipment has gotten more accessible in such a way. But then I feel like it's a really big jump from like the entry or the easy to understand setups. Hey, you want to stream video games? You need a camera, a mic, and OBS. To the like middle ground or the really weird. So the creative streaming, I think, is one of the places that I've struggled the most. That there's like not a lot of um in the same way as other streaming, there's not a lot of here's an article talking about the different sorts of equipment you should consider or what have you, because creative streaming is a comparatively small subset of overall streaming. But then the other jump is you go from here's the entry, here's the basics, to this is what a professional uses.
Right.
And so, like, when I first was like, "Oh, yeah, lav mics," and I was doing a little bit of reading and what have you, it was like there were a couple, like, really basic, like, "Oh, you wanna use, like, your phone as one," or something, and then it jumped to, like, the $500. You're starting to go into being a professional videographer or something, and I'm going like, "Where's the middle ground? And how do I learn more about it to know?" Um, so I think there's, like, certain parts of the tech in the space that's a little more challenging to learn about and figure out where to go in on, just by nature of, like, what's the lowest barrier to entry. Most people stream games,
Hmm.
relatively speaking. So there's a lot of articles and people that have written about and talked about, streaming games, and not maybe as many of people being like, "Well, I stream sewing." Shout out to Imperial, who does stream sewing and is absolutely willing to talk about her equipment. But she also has a really wild setup that she's had for years, and it's evolved over time. But like, she has like 12 cameras
Yeah,
and multiple machines.
I'm always
And I think
amazed.
I'm like, this is the dream. Your setup is the dream. Like, one day I hope I think it's her basement, a basement that I can convert into a full sewing studio and have multiple tables with multiple different types of sewing machines and a camera for each of them.
Yeah, and
Respect. One day.
go check out Imperial. Does awesome streams all the time. And yeah, as we were talking about lav mics, which if you don't know are just little mics that you see pinned to newscasters and sportscasters. If you see a mic,
Mhm.
that's a lav mic, and they're just pinned. And so within last year and at the CES, Rode has gotten more into that middle ground of wireless streaming, and there was a couple other companies that did that too. So yeah, if you look at Rode and another company I can't remember the name of, there is that middle ground starting to build. But again, if you don't know about Rode, if you're not following CES 2024 and articles on it, and they just happen to mention the thing, there's not really a lot of talk about it. So
I do feel like there's certain aspects of and again, I'm thinking of it from kind of the vectors of their streaming, and then there's uh, progressively complex streaming, which
hmm
is like sewing by itself is not complex. It's like set up a camera in front of your sewing machine. But as you start to consider all those factors of like, well, what am I showing? What am I doing? Do I need to have a different table visible? What have you? Um, that to your point, it's like a lot of my discovery there has been from others. So it's sitting in like listening to you talking about what you saw at CES. It's sitting in Imperial's chat because she ended up actually like I happened to be there one day when she was talking about mics, and she was like, "Yeah, I think like at the time the newest Rode wireless that they had put out was."
hmm
She was talking about it being on our wish list, and I was like, "What the heck is this?" I had I don't want to say no idea, because I think we had briefly been talking about lav mics before that in your chat, but like it was kind of like it was from you all that I was learning it, and it wasn't something that was coming by naturally being an understood component of like streaming and having wireless equipment. In the way that, oh, well, you have a mic and you have a camera kind of thing, like that base, I guess, onboarding knowledge that somebody has when you
hmm
get into streaming. So yes, you're not wrong. Where I'm like, I don't know what to look for. So I've definitely talked to you about it. I've talked to Imperial about it. I'm sure that's something, or actually, I can guarantee that's something that's happening soon. I have a couple pieces of equipment on the way.
Excellent. And that's another thing I try to do is talk about tech and things because you don't have to spend the decades in video production I have to know about this stuff. You can just come and ask me, and I'll tell you.
DC is great for this. Can confirm.
you, you really don't have to spend uh, you know 20 years in video production to start streaming or anything like that, and because everything is more compact, we have more ways to stream and communicate than ever before. And then just there's, some people out there that actually go, okay, here's what this looks like, here's what this does if you're streaming, if you're kind of in this budget range type of thing, and what you're looking for. And that's great. I really like that these things have opened up.
Yeah. Well, I know we're gonna dovetail into video games soon, but it's one of the things I think about where it's like the most wild lowering of a barrier to entry for streaming. And I know this because it was part of my own story and like getting into being on Twitch and stuff like that was when Twitch was integrated into the PS4. So it's like, okay, now you can stream directly from your console. You don't need any extra equipment. Like you don't even technically have to wear a headset with a mic. You could just be streaming the game. Though of course it helps to like talk to people and engage. And like I had been on Twitch before that because my account's from the Justin TV days. So like I had been here, but it was like a sporadic on and off, and it was Twitch integration on PS4, and then I think it was the Destiny beta that I was in the first time that they were like, yeah, this can be streamed. I was like, sold on PlayStation, let's go. And like that was I think like that first time where I was like, it did feel so easy to do versus the complexity of what it felt like to be doing streaming before that. Um, so to your point, it gets technology. Yeah. The first, I actually I can't say it's the first things I streamed on my channel, which of course is lost to time because they don't archive anything.
Right.
But it's like the first thing I remember standing out to me the most, like mentally, because I'd been doing stuff before that. I podcasted, we would do Twitch streams and things, but like that was the one time where I was like, this was so easy. And it was a wild thought to be like, yeah, I just like hit go live on my PlayStation console and I was playing Destiny on stream. Who can imagine it now?
Yeah, right.
It's been it's been a decade. Oh god. Sorry, I
Speaking
just
of,
realized that
oh,
time passes.
yeah. So we're going to head into break, and then when we come back, we'll get into video game streaming and things like that. But before we do that, speaking of technology, I am in the enhanced broadcasting program for Twitch, and so my video card is encoding 3 separate streams: 1080, I can't remember. I have to actually look. 1080p 60, 720p 30, and 360p 30. So when we come back, if a couple of you could do me a favor, click the gear and just try the uh, quality of those different sources. So on your Twitch player, hover your mouse over there. There's a little gear. You click, you'll have quality. Just click that and go through those settings and tell me what they look like. They should look, for what they are, they should look pretty good. I've already had one report that when I was playing video games the other day on 360p, I was a little soft, which is to be expected because of the resolution, but the video game text could still be read just fine. So we're trying it out, and yeah, if you can all help me out with that, that'd be great. But we will be right back and talking about video games and other things. So see you all in about 5 minutes. See you soon. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around after the break, or for the break, and now it's after the break. Those are the words I meant to say in that order.
It all made sense. It's
It all
fine.
made sense. Yeah, the words. All right. So I am with the lovely Lady Luck 34 over. Yeah, I'm pointing the right way. Yeah. Right over there.
Did I do the wrong way? I'm like, which side am I on? Trying to figure out.
Yeah, we
Nope, I
got.
did
We got.
this way.
Yeah, yep. You're right. You're right for pointing at me. I'm right for pointing at you.
I was looking at the
OBS
wrong screen. It's fine. This is how fusion happens.
Yep. And go check out Lady Luck 34. There's a website you can look at.
Oh my god, right? I have a blog.
Yeah.
In addition to streaming. It's mostly for myself because I like going through the process of like writing / typing it up. But then I'm like, well, if I'm gonna go through all this effort, I might as well like put it someplace where other people can see it.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best logic.
Check that out. Follow her everywhere, Lady Luck 34.
All the places.
All the places.
All the things.
Why only create things in one place, right?
When you could do it in multiple places. Because why not? Yeah, that's basically it.
All right, we're going to talk about your video game setup, and
Yeah.
a couple things I'm interested in is one, you do have Couch Time with Susie video games, which I'm guessing is your laptop. And you mentioned you have a
Yes,
Switch. Now you got to get that video signal to your laptop. You're using a capture card of some type. Yes.
I am.
Yeah.
I am using the Elgato HD 60.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I bought it on sale a number of years ago, where I was finally like, oh, I'm finally willing to do it. It was because it's funny because I've largely streamed. So the bulk of my current streaming has happened over the last 4 years for a lot of us who got more into streaming or picked it up as part of like pandemic. Somebody hang out and chat and keep me company. Um, but I've been streaming on and off for a decade plus, and uh, it was either I was doing the like console straight from console, PS4 integration, what have you, or I was on PC because I've had gaming PCs basically since I had enough money to build them myself, or once since I started like having enough money to build them myself. Um so it was a whole thing to be like, oh, I'm playing a lot on the Switch and I really want to stream it, and being like, well, crap. The Switch doesn't have Twitch integration, and your only option is a capture card. So I picked up the Elgato HD 60, and that was a journey because I didn't know how to set it up appropriately. Because it was like on like the PlayStation or the Xbox, it's integration. You just go live from the console. On the Switch, I was like, wait, I have to set up OBS and it has to go through Switch, and there's like, I have to have something for audio. And there were like a couple extra steps that came with the capture card that I wasn't knowledgeable on, and it took me a bit to get it set up correctly. At one point, I had video but no sound. Then I had sound but no video. Then nothing was working. Um, and then it got made worse. I shouldn't say made worse, but it got worse when I was like, oh, I want to stream. I want to have the benefit that comes with using the capture card. So, like, the main thing with that I find with capture card is like you're running it through an OBS or another streaming software, which means that now you can start having all the things you would expect with somebody streaming from PC: alerts, overlays, being able to do, have fundraiser things up, stuff you can't do from the console integrations. Um, so I don't even remember what it was that I was like, I want to play on the PlayStation. So, okay, first off, PlayStation is more difficult because they have like their, you can't have this setting on for video while you're using a capture card, because what if you're recording entertainment, which was annoying. Um, and then I was like, "Oh, I'll buy myself a switcher, and I'll be able to rent." First off, it's not that simple. And then I broke it all again, um, because again, the PlayStation is like, because then it was like, well, what if I'm not like, essentially, if I was running my HDMI from the PlayStation to the switcher, and then from the switcher through the capture card into the computer, then I had to have that particular setting off, which meant that anytime I wanted to play or watch TV or whatever, which then was a thing, or I say watch TV, put on like Netflix. Well, you got to turn that setting back on, which means it can't be plugged into the switcher to the to the capture card. So I was going through this comedy of like, I need to move where everything's set up, so I have a really easy way to like plug and unplug the HDMI between the TV and the splitter, so that I can swap back and forth. But all of this was, I made my life so much more complicated than it needed to be. But but basically, like, the net of it is I had, for travel reasons, had finally broke down a couple years ago. I had the money and I was like, I'm doing enough trips and I want to play video games and like visit my family, what have you, that I bought a gaming laptop, and it had enough. It's not like top of the line, it was very middling, but it was like powerful enough for me to be able to run multiple things at a time on it. So I got the capture card mainly to play Switch. I think it was specifically because I wanted to play the Nino Kuni. game.
Oh
The second
yeah.
one. Or like I knew I was gonna play it, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna be playing this for like 3 months, but I want to keep streaming, so I need the capture card because otherwise I'm just not gonna stream because all I'm gonna play is this. But yeah, so it was like, okay, having the computer, having all the wires line up, making sure that it worked with whatever consoles I wanted to work with. Um, as we saw, because I was streaming from the Switch last night, forgetting that I don't have everything that I set up on the PC. I forgot to copy all of that over to the laptop. So I was like, why are my auto shoutouts not happening? That should be every time one of you talks in chat. You know
Right.
why? Because I never set up streamer bot on. So like me, this is the other thing too, is the duplicating your system and your setup between computers is a challenge. Just because you forget stuff like that, where I'm like, I forgot to put alerts on. I forgot to forgot to install StreamerBot so everything would be set
Hmm.
up. Um, but yeah, so that was the video game thing. And then because this is really funny to me, despite it being like 3 years, at least 2 years, maybe 3 years after that game came out, Ni no Kuni, the second one, which I'm blanking on the subtitle, um, they still had it where they would block the end of the game if you were streaming. They would be like, "Yeah, you can't do that." So like I so it was this really good thing. Like we were getting, it's been this whole journey. We were at the last battle. We
Uh-huh.
were all really excited. Like they do the JRPG thing where they're going, "Hey, you're about to go into the last battle. Are you sure you want to do this?"
Right.
And we're like, "This is it, y'all." I was streaming it. I was streaming at that moment, and I was like, "Yes, I do." And it was like a little pop up thing or something. I forget what happened where they're like, "We see that you have a capture card and that you're like streaming this." I don't know how that's set up. But they were basically like, yeah, the answer is no. And so
Oh no.
like Twitch was like, it kind of went to the like you get the this content is not available screen or something
Hmm.
through it. And so it was this whole thing where I was like, can we the game's been out for at least 2 years, can we figure this out? Only to be like, nope. So like literally with like an hour left at least from what I would have been streaming, I'm like, so I guess I'm ending stream, y'all, because like I want to
Oh
finish the
no.
game, but I can't take you with me. So stream challenges.
Yeah, possibly.
Things you couldn't have planned for, but yes. So that was very much. But yeah, so um and then as hilariously, it's probably the same camera. I do the same thing. That I think it's the Logitech C920 is the
Hmm.
one that I will move around. So when I want to do a couch co stream with Susie, when I'm playing on console, what have you, that's what I do is I pull out the somewhere is the somewhere is my ring light on its like half, like foot and a half tall tripod. Then I'll bust that out. I'll unplug the camera and I'll move it over and get it all into the laptop and stream. And then you can have Susie on the couch kind of thing. So it's funny because it's like I feel like a lot of people have very stationary setups, and I feel like I've made mine a very transient setup. So yeah, but yeah, so I can do games and I can play on like the Switch. Like what was it? I was playing like Mega Man Battle Network, I think one of the times, and but I can have a camera, which is usually on Susie, or I can do those things, and that's still like it's just I'm picking and choosing what technology I want to use to get the end result I'm looking for between my selection of things.
And are you what are you using for your microphone for a couch setup? Is it have you graduated to the headset or
I do have a headset there. It is what headset is it? I can tell you in just a second.
excellent?
I've this is the other thing because I've like been I hate to say because I've been doing this so long because that's not the right phrase, but I have so many different like I have multiple keyboards, I have multiple headsets, I have multiple mics and cameras, and you just like keep accumulating them. Um, which is also partially I will own this. I'm the type of person who goes, well, it still works, so I don't need to replace it. And that was my philosophy for a very long time. And so I had for my Xbox and my PlayStation, um, Astro A40s that I had gotten through work almost a decade before. when we did a collaboration in a past life, this a past work life with Astro. And so I would look at them and be like, well, they're not great and they're a decade old and I'm still struggling with different things with them and like they're becoming less effective, but they still mostly work.
Hmm.
And somebody was just finally like, your life would be so much better if you would just buy a new headset. It's not actually that much. You've had them for a decade. You've more than gotten the money you didn't spend on them out of them. And so like that's been a journey to be like, I can buy myself nice things, like a small upgrade in a headset. And then hilariously, I ended up like, I shouldn't say ended up, but um I have like 2 headsets that now float around. This is the other DC knows because I've been doing it for this, is like, I like wireless headsets. You do have to recharge them, but then I can wander around my apartment and still be on a call. As soon as it loads, I will tell
As
you what
soon
I
as you.
ordered. I'm pretty sure it's a Logitech like G435 headset, but I want to not lie to you.
So while you're doing that, hey, I'll do a quick plug for something I'm doing. I have AP coming up February 5th, 7:03 p.m. over at the Amphitheater. It's called Lord of the Thorns, and it's there. So check it out. It'd be great. If you did that.
I was off.
That was announced this week. So it starts February 5th, 7 p.m. Eastern on their channel. I will both be DMing and producing, and we have a Logitech G535 headset.
I was off by one number. I was mostly correct. I was like, I'm pretty sure it was that. So like the headset I'm wearing is a Rig 800 here, which it's not clear. I bought it at Best Buy. A friend had recommended it. And I think they used to be like Plantronics, but I'm not 100% sure because when I look it up now, it's just like Rig 800. And I'm like, what brand are you? Like that's the model. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of like well, like not obnoxiously priced wireless headsets. I have a preference for the large over the ear when I'm gaming, just from like a sound immersion standpoint. Um, everybody, I mean, you're obviously have like the nice little buds, which are nice. Like that would probably be more helpful to me when I'm sewing. But it's like, how many layers of equipment do I really want to have?
Right.
I've already made my life way more complicated than it needs to be with my sewing setup. I don't think I need to make it worse. So I have a lot of like modular things.
Hmm.
Theoretically, each of these could work in multiple places, but I've just acquired them at different times. And it's nice to be like, yeah, I have the laptop with the headset, and it's kind of like on the lower shelf of my coffee table when I'm not using it. Um, and it's out of the way. And then that's the stuff that's always there. So I don't have to worry about like, oh, I need a headset. Does it need to be on that computer or this computer? Because I have absolutely misplaced the little dongles with the
Oh yeah.
things before and been like, well, but now what? This
So when you're streaming from not from your couch to your video game, you're carrying your capture card into the room you're in now, or do you just do video games on the couch? That like the space.
I just have the PC set up here.
Okay.
Um, so kind of like couch is console and PC is here, so I don't have to mess with the capture card. Because let me tell you, getting
Excellent.
it set up the first time was like a hassle. Because I've on and off been like, well, what if I do this or what if I do that? And then I'm going like, that sounds like a lot of complicated figuring out how to make things work better. I think if I ever, I wouldn't do it in this setup with in the current apartment I live in because it wouldn't be practical. But if I was ever to have like be able to have a dedicated gaming room or like a larger space where I could set up the couch with the nicer TV. I don't have that nice a TV, but it's like good enough that it feels
Hmm.
fancy. Um that if I could set that up and have the computer in between and then have, if I could have everything in one room, but it's a little bit of like, how do I make space for all the things I'm trying to do in one apartment? And it ended up being like, you know what, it's better for capture card and consoles to be out there so that they get their own space. And I'm not trying to smush them in here with crafty time because y'all can't see it. Well, you can. Uh, Behind the pillar are shelves of fabric. Um, And what you can't see is to my left is everything else, which is the project shelves and the dice making shelves in my printer and some miscellaneous other project stuff. I see like one of the Pokeballs I painted, and I'm like, I don't know what's in that basket, but it's probably actually no, I can read it. Granny squares. 104 crocheted granny squares in that basket with a Pokeball. I don't know why the Pokeball is there. I'm sorry. Clearly, I needed someplace to put the Pokeball, and I was like, all right, and with the granny squared, like crochet granny squares makes sense. This is the other thing. You get kind of organized, and then you have a couple of random things where you're like, I don't know where to put this, so it's joining something else. But yeah, so no, luckily for me, the capture card does not move. Just PC gaming in here, which I can more easily do with just straight OBS, and this camera is the C922 Logitech. So
Great
when we were
camera.
playing Scary Resident Evil, this was what it looked like. Well, like darker and more ominous. And I was making a frowny face the whole time. I'm told I have a very good frowny face. So I was like, just displeased with this whole thing. Leon, you make terrible life choices. If you learn nothing from the last 3 games. No, you've learned nothing from the last 3 games.
Video game protagonists are the worst at learning things.
They don't at all. Like, it'd be one thing if it was just a sequel. I say this as somebody who only made it partway through Resident Evil 8, but we spent like I was playing it at a friend's place, and we were spending the whole time being like, did he learn nothing from 7? We just went through this whole thing in one game. What are you doing, dude? Like, at least that was only one game. Leon's 3 games in, 4 games in.
Right?
He still learned nothing.
Like, come on, Leon. We're doing our best for you, but you got to meet us halfway, buddy.
Right? The real struggle of video game streaming is you're being like, well, now people get to hear the commentary that I have as I'm playing, because most of my commentary is me being like, why are you doing this? Why? Have you did you not see this very blatant, signal of what's about to happen? I know who I am. Tagline: I regret mistakes were made. I regret nothing. I regret everything, and then I know who I am. I have a very clear list of what will be on my tombstone at the end of my
life. I have to say, one I've been playing Sea of Stars, and to go off on a rabbit rabbit hole, one of those, whichever you like, trails, holes, up to you. Don't listen to me anymore. But one thing I liked about in Sea of Stars is that there was a thing, and you're like, oh, you're totally this person, and no one mentions it, and you're like, you're totally this person. Everyone, you got to know you're this. Everyone has to know you're this person, but no one's saying anything. And then they go to reveal themselves, and the characters say, yeah, we figured that out. I'm like, thank you, game.
Yes, like, acknowledge it. I will say that it's funny because I've been lurking in those streams, because I do intend to play Sea of Stars at some point. Mm-hmm. So I've been like, I'm here in like ultimate lurk mode, so that I'm supporting, but that I'm not getting any spoilers. But I think about it because this came up in Detective Pikachu Returns, where at the very beginning of the game, you run the character you're playing as Tim. Mm-hmm. You run into his mom and his sister, and they're talking about did you know they made a movie about what happened? And they're referencing the last game. Mm-hmm. And we weren't even in it. And it's sort of like going on and on. You're like, oh, they're making fun of the Detective Pikachu movie because they weren't in the movie despite being in the game. And it's just like the whole time you're like, yes. So you really like when they acknowledge those things. But yeah, it's been an interesting it's interesting. I don't want to say learning about yourself, but having that oh, this is what I'm actually like when other people can see me interacting with the media that I like. And so I absolutely am just constantly being like, why is it like this? It's why I'm not allowed to the Hallmark movie days with my friends anymore, because they all want to enjoy the very formulaic Hallmark movies. And I'm the one going like, if they just talk to each other, this would have never happened. And because I have to. You have that moment where you're saying something, and then partway through you're like, oh, out of context, that would be terrible. My best / worst are always going to be in October. Always, without a doubt, because we go off the rails because Halloween and everything. And I have a clip that's me being like, I would keep you warm in winter. And then, like, as I'm saying it, and like, I'll have the smoothest, fluffiest coat, and then I'm like, oh, out of context, this is really gonna suck. And it was because at the time I was talking about like if I was a werewolf. But like you didn't get the if I was a werewolf at the beginning. You got the I would keep you warm in winter. And like anybody who showed up during those streams knows that we absolutely it's like stream of conscious thought, which a lot of us do, but like it's worse because I'm typically sewing, but then also talking about anything that strikes me. Like, is it ethical to keep your friend as a pet if they're a werewolf?
Right.
I don't know, but so yeah, out of context comments is the best and the worst. So I've been there. Totally get it. You're like, this is fine, this is fine. And then a split second year later, you're like, what did I just say? And I hope nobody paid attention to that. It's an entire mood for streamers. Like, oh.
It is. All right. So, just to make sure we covered it, anything else? We went down quite a trail of video games there. Anything else you want to
Yeah,
talk
we did.
about?
We derailed a little bit, but that's fine.
That's fine.
No, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's just it's interesting when you take a step and say like, what about your tech? What about your setup? Because it's like to your as we were talking about, like kind of having a very standard setup, what you do, how you do it, and then you have the like, I keep adding new hobbies. Or I want to try different things, and not all or at least not the easily accessible, therefore less expensive technology is quite as um good for the I want to keep moving things around. It's one of the reasons why I haven't like I keep looking at some of the are they key lights?
Are
Is
you
it
talking about the
Elgato who does the
Elgato key lights? Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
have one here
I'm
and
sitting
one
here
here.
I've been thinking about it, but then again, my issue with that is the way my space is set up and the way I move things around. Would I be able to put them in a stationary position that would be effective for all the ways in which I move cameras and I'm in different parts
Right.
of the room? I will say that's like one of the reasons that I find I love like again sitting in your chat as you're talking about different things, being like, oh, that's intriguing, and like keeping it in the back of my head or writing a note to be like, oh, look this up later on the VOD. But I think the more I've done things around like crochet, sewing, like the crafty things that aren't quite as stationary in the same way as video games when it comes to tech, is though I'm even more like not skeptical, but less willing to just say, let me buy something to try, because there's so many ways in which it won't work.
Right.
Or it just makes my life more complicated. I say this because I'm like, it's folded up now, but like the tripod is I don't have it out all the time because it takes up space and it's in the room. Susie, I've been pulling all of my recent VODs because I'm trying to actually get in a habit of saving them and watching them. And like there's one where Susie kept running into the tripod as I was trying to like start stream and discuss and like run through like here's the things that are coming up, what have you. And so it's like she would run into it and the camera would be offset and I'd adjust it and be like, Susie, stop doing, go over there. And it was it was like I think we called it a Monday on a Thursday at that point because it was so off the rails from like pets are something you have to consider with your technology as well. Well, some people have maybe other people's pets are less in the way, but it's one thing that I think about when we're like talking about tech and things is like how they how they fit for your needs, and my needs keep changing and I keep making it more complicated, which I do to myself, but also like I get to try and do interesting things on stream, and some of them work and some of them don't.
All right. If you have any questions in chat, please ask them. Now's the time. We got about 20-ish minutes left in stream, so please ask away. Anything that we've
Ask all the things.
talked about. Yeah, ask all the things. We'll try to answer. I don't know if you have questions about phases of the moon. Even I can't answer
We
those.
may not be able to answer them very well, but we'll try.
We'll try.
It's my favorite when people are like, well, I know nothing about this topic, but if you just want a BS answer, I'm happy to give you one.
Exactly.
it can be very entertaining to be like, what can I come up with on a topic that I know nothing about? As long as everybody knows that you know nothing about it. So like,
Right.
don't take this as real. Just how would you react to X answer? Um, it's funny because I was like, where did I put my? I was trying to find my. I have a pin that says, "In my defense, the moon was full, and I was left unsupervised," um, which feels accurate for a lot of things in my life. Uh, what actually, my entire tech setup, because I don't know how much this is like visible or comes up on. I'm now thinking about it where you might know if you've been in like chat when it's happened is like I knock over stuff. I trip over wires. I like it's one of those where it's you're like, how visible is me having just massive struggles in that perspective of like, well, it's cord management for your computer, but for your stream.
Yes. Oh, Herb asked a question for both of us. Uh, did you see the dog played speed run, and how do you think your pets would fare playing video games?
Uh, Susie would fail at the very beginning. And by fail, I just mean that like she would not have the willing attention span to be that dedicated for that long to get more than like 5 feet into the first level.
And if you didn't see it, it was on AGDQ just a week or so ago. The dog's name is Peanut Butter, and
Peanut butter, that's right.
the owner had trained it to play Gyromite, which is a Nintendo game where there used to be this thing called ROB, which stood for Robotic Operating Buddy. And in Gyromite, you can make it move. It was totally impractical for the game because you could just pick up the controller and hit the A and B buttons. But the what the Gyromite thing would do, and this would raise and lower pillars for you to
Hmm.
move your little guy through. And so what Rob would do would go over this way, pick up a spinny thing, put the spinny thing on the A button, put the spinny, pick it up, put it on the B button, depending if you needed the red or blue pillar to move. And and so that took some timing if you did it that way, or you could just not have Rob and hit the A and B button on the controller as you needed. But so this guy took the controller and kind of made it big and spent over a year training his dog Peanut Butter on pressing a button. Like we want him to go over here, he had a clicker. And it's amazing. You check it out. It's great. Plus, you get to see a dog for like 20 minutes playing a video game. Who wouldn't want to do that? And my cat wouldn't care. Just gets the pets, goes take a nap or whatever, or wants to play. Yeah, I could never get my cat to care enough to do it.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe Susie would be like food motivated for a little bit, but I blame Springly for that. For this is that we typically say that Susie shows up on stream when I'm like sewing and stuff that she's doing her like union mandated time, and then when she leaves me, where she's like, I'll hang out for a few minutes because I know you'll pet me and you might like show me on stream, and then she's like, cool, I'm going to sleep someplace else. So.
All right, and a question for you. What do you think might be the next creative crafting bug to bite?
Do you want the actual one that just happened, or do you want what I think's gonna happen next?
Both.
Um, I have fallen down the rabbit hole of decorative planning and journaling, and I have now spent probably too much money on stickers and washi tape. And because I am that type of person, I actually like brought them here if I
Excellent.
wanted to for a split second show you. Um, So just like an example, they're not great. I'm still figuring them out, but like getting a little bit better with like my planner and stuff with things like that. Um, some days are better than others, and that's a whole mess. Which also devolved because I started watching like YouTube videos for it, and this is a comedic mismatch, which is why I want to show it. Which is then doing reading journals for tracking your reading and stuff like that. And
Oh
it's funny
wow.
to me because the only book that I had with no lines is a Dead Island book. The only notebook I had, because I was like, oh, I have a couple. No, all of them have lines, which get in the freaking way when you're doing like your own templates. So it's very funny to me. Small aside story for this, because I was still covering the games industry when Dead Island was in development and was coming out, and I got to see it behind closed doors at E3 that particular year. And for those of you that don't know, it was like the open world version of Left 4 Dead. You had like 4 people, you could co-op together, but rather than you having to move through a specific level, you were in an open world trying to like find supplies and solve complete quest missions so that you could eventually escape. So we're in this guided demo with a dev, and by sequence of events, I was the tanky character for this guided demo. And it was like, oh, it's fine. For any of you who have either watched me play video games or have played video games with me, you know I have a short attention span and I want to loot everything. And so we're getting this guided playthrough with a dev, and they go into a fight and they're like, where are you, tank? I'd wandered off. I was like down by the docks. There's no loot. Like, this was a build specifically made to demo at E3.
Mm-hmm.
So there was nothing I was going to find. There was no loot that I was going to find. There was going to be nothing interesting off the track that the deck. So they went into this fight with zombies, and I'm nowhere nearby because I've wandered off and nobody noticed. And one of my buddies who's in chat occasionally when I'm streaming David 2 Sly was also there at that particular appointment because we were both with the same podcast at the time. And it was because he's just sitting here going like, oh my God, this is you. Why are you doing this? And this poor dev is like, why are you not here? So anyways, that's when I got this Dead Island, but the thing that's funny to me is you have like very, zombie Dead Island, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the next page is like, oh, pretty and pinks and golds and so like thematically not matching up. So anyways, so my current like the thing that got me is like books. So reading journal, there's a whole bunch of different things, and I'm like getting more creative, or like I'm using them as like testing grounds for like how do I want to use washi tape and how do I want stickers and what do I want to like draw versus write versus. So anyways, that's the current one, and the next one is I don't know how well you all can see it if it's on screen. I'm trying to look. I would have to turn the camera just a little bit. I'm gonna see if this actually works. I'm like watching the live stream, like, will you see it? Okay. In the corner of the camera is this little orange bag down here.
Mm-hmm.
That is full of embroidery kits.
Ooh.
Because before the quilting got out of hand, before the dice making happened, before the decorative planning and journaling happened, I thought I was going to learn how to embroider. And I bought some supplies, and then some people gave me some things. And now I'm like, well, that's probably going to happen this year. So yeah, basically I have zero self-control and I'm willing to try anything. And I also have very little time because I keep filling it with more and more hobbies.
I was going to ask you, because I asked you this before and I completely forgot. You did a journaling stream once. I really liked your journal, and I've completely forgotten the name of the journal you recommended.
Oh, yes. We'll put it in. It is the Hobonichi Tech Now. Hobonichi. It is a Japanese-based company. And there are they do have some distributors in like North America, so you can look them up. They do a couple different versions. I actually like going to the Japanese website because they do have a like, here's the comparison between the different ones. There's kind of like the classic. There's what I have, which is the Han, which is a hardcover. This is also a the other version, not version, but other name for this is the cousin, which basically means it has months, weeks, and days. And then they have like a weeks, which is a thinner, just like it depends on what type of planning you want to do. Mine changes. I buy a different planner every year. I had a Hobonichi 2022, just based on what I think I need at that time. But yes, so let me tell you about planners. But so I recommend like checking out the Japanese website to see the comparisons, and then you can look up who distributes in the U.S. So like JetPens is one. I live in the Northeast, so there's a stationery company or shop called the Paper Mouse in Boston that that sells them and ships. Um, just because a couple of years ago it wasn't as bad to ship from Japan and just buy it direct. At this point, it's probably going to net out to being about the same price, and you'll just get it way faster if you ship it from here, from someplace in North America. So yes, Hobonichi is my current one. So yeah, I did one planner stream, and I keep being like, oh, maybe I'll do another one, and that just hasn't happened because now I'm on Detective Pikachu until I finish it.
Because I got some fancy pens.
Nice.
I've
Yes.
been looking for a journal to fill them, and then I saw yours, and I looked at the website. I'm like, ooh, this might be the thing. So,
It's just it's so interesting because it's different things where it's like, here we go, like, this is not like the best, but it's like, how can you use markers? This is all actually one giant sticker cut into like multiple layers. Like, there's just I find it almost meditative in terms of like a time to sort of wind down and process through the day, to sit and be like, do I want to draw out a template? Do I want to write like my thoughts for the day? So I say decorative planning because my planner functions as like half planner, half journal. And then doing kind of the artsy stuff in the reading journal is like just a different creative output. And it's smaller, you can do it kind of on your own. So us talking about dice making where it's like, oh, you spend an hour making the dice and you ignore it for 24 hours. I can take as little or as much time with the planner and the journal, which is a little bit different than like when I'm sewing something and I'm like, but I want to keep going. I want to get this done. You know, there's a clear start and end,
mm-hmm.
which means that it feels like a little bit more pressure to be like, well, let me keep going until I do it. So I don't find sewing to be something that I can easily like pick up and do for 20 minutes and then put back down. Um, yes, I'm happy to talk planners anytime.
All right.
I have it's
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like the funny thing of when you chat with people, they're like, "Oh, organization." I'm like, I had to build this organization. Like in the
Mm-hmm.
context of organizing and planning and things like that are skills that you can improve over time. They're like communication. There are some people who are just naturally talented at it. I was not one of those people. Any of these things where it's like my life fell apart. I need to figure out how to like not have that happen, and you build that skill over time. Um, so for me, it's like a lot of this is by nature of like, well, I was having X problem and I was trying to solve it and I ended up at Y solution. And that just looks really good to everyone else. But it took me a bit to get there. I'm sure it's a bit like
All right.
you trying to sort out tech stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, let me try and solve the problem.
Is there a solution? Is there a solution that's good for me? Is does this have a button, knob, or slider on it that I can use?
It's when we talk about like tech and way things are set up and things, it's planning, organizing, whatever. It's always the like, this is what has worked for me.
Mhm.
And I think it's technology is a little bit I don't want to say more difficult, but when we were talking about like streaming setups, like, well, to have a camera to try, you have to probably buy it, which means that if it doesn't work for you and it's not like a technical failure of the device that you can return or get an exchange for, you're kind of out that money unless you try to resell it. Not to say it's not the same thing for planning, but there's like I've had ones where it's like, oh, here's like a habit tracker because I thought that would work for me, and I ended up being like, ooh, actually, habit trackers are not my speed. And so it's like I have this one where I'm like, well, what do I do with it now? I haven't figured that out yet. Um, I try to use it on and off because then I'm like, well, at least I should try and get like fill it halfway. But like different things work for different people.
All right, we have time for one, maybe two more questions. If you have any, please put them in chat. I do want to quickly talk about one more thing you have that I really like, which is the flip phone that you have. These
Eh.
are amazing, and I just like them. Look at that
Uh,
screen. I mean, come on.
um, I really like it. One of the things I will say, which is like a comedic adventure with phones, is when you go into some of the more like kind of novelty-esque phones, their
Mm-hmm.
dimensions are slightly off from what the standard is on like an iPhone or a classic Galaxy, Samsung Galaxy phone. And so I do run into the occasional where like this is a little bit thinner and a little bit taller than those. And so sometimes when you're typing, you're like, everything's off because I've like trained myself to the size of those other phones for like the
Right.
last decade. Um, or like comedically, games or various apps are not dimensioned to that phone yet because for a lot of developers, it's like unless it's again, the iPhone Plus, the Samsung Ultra, whatever those are, like the standard ones that they do iteratively year over year. A lot of these are like, they'll wait until they think that there's a big enough adoption before they like format for that dimension
Mm-hmm.
to an app. So I've like had some very comedic like sequences with a couple of games where I'm like, why is it like this? Um, before I realized. But like overall, I personally find it like a really fun also just I'm realizing like everything I have on this that you all are seeing for my screensavers and stuff are all Pokemon themed, which tracks. But like it's a calendar. It's not very well seeing. I'm trying to get like the lighting less bad, but like weather, um, timer, so I can do like a countdown. So that's like super easy. All of my alarms because I have a million. Um, they have the set apps that they approve
Mm-hmm.
as like being good for the front screen, but then you can install some extra stuff um, and then add more, which is what I've done. And I don't know, I find it like super helpful. It mostly fits. It fits in most of my pockets, which for those of you that don't know, women's pockets suck. They assume you're going to carry a purse, and sometimes you don't want to. Um, so I can usually fit it into like a pair of jeans, a pocket, or what have you, which is really nice. And then to your point, like, all right, when I actually need the full screen, or it's an app that's like, oh, we only give you a notification, I can flip it open and it's I don't know. I now have it. I have had it for a good like 4 months, I think, and it's been a great phone. So I don't know. To your point, it
Nice.
flips. It's cool. It's I don't know how well you'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I have the mint color phone, and then I got
Ooh.
like this sparkly heart clear thing on it because I was like, first you need to be able to see the mint, but then I want
Mhm.
it to be more than just basic clear, so I have this like holographic hearts and sparkles.
All
So
right.
yes.
Thank you for showing off your phone again.
Listen,
I know I
I'm
asked you at
happy to
PAX here,
talk
but
about. We did the whole thing. Brian was there too. Brian knows. We did the whole thing with it's like um taking the photos with because that's the other thing is you can basically if I actually touch it correctly, you can open and take the front facing photos if you want to. And then I think we were doing it where we had it up so that we could take a photo together from the
Mhm.
distance. Um, So like I use that as a little bit of a cheat. Like I'm on the couch and Susie's someplace fun, but like moving, opening the whole phone and everything is a hassle. So I'm like, let me just slide my thumb across, opens up, snap a photo. Um, so yeah, we got to talk about. I'm always happy to talk about these things. Let me tell you all about all the silly ways in which I put Pokemon all over my phone.
All right. So
Um,
we're going to wrap up. If you have any questions while we're wrapping up, we'll try to get to them. Otherwise, thank you so much for being on today. Let people know all your things,
all the things. That's right.
all the things.
So you can find me as shown here as Lady Luck 34 around the internet, including here on Twitch. I usually stream on Monday and Thursday evenings, so you can find me doing a variety of things like that. I typically aim to start around 8 p.m. Eastern, which should be the same for this upcoming week. I am taking a sewing class in February, so I'll have to shift my schedule a little bit because I keep doing that to myself. I pick the ones that are the same nights I usually stream. But that is someplace you can always find me. Obviously, we're here with DC being great today. I'm also going to be taking part in a short run actual play with Mass Effect based game run on the 5E system, but Mass Effect. I'm going to be playing a Solarian engineer, which is going to be a whole adventure. And we kick that off on Praxagoria Thesmophoria's channel Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And otherwise, like you said, find me around the internet. I'm Lady Luck 34. I blog that I update sporadically. I try to do at least one a month, but that doesn't always work out. And playing games and doing crafty things and posting about it.
All right, excellent. And follow everywhere. Lady Luck 34. Do it now. I'm watching. No, I'm not. But just follow. You'll have a good time. So, and I'm DC. You can find me everywhere under DC Lasair. Go to dclasair.bio.link for a link to all my links. Everything I have eventually winds up there. And I have a bunch of announcements to go through. So, first of all, still raising for PCRF. Take that link. $20. I put another hat on my head. I'll be doing this at least through Monday, where we get back to Sea of Stars playthrough. And hey, I love that.
It's a very large hat, but
very large hat. So if you can donate, go ahead, please do so. Also, let's see here. Chopper hat, yeah.
Chopper's great.
Chopper. I will be at GaryCon with a panel on producing. I know it's amazing, me doing a producing panel, but you can bookmark that, and event signups happen in February based on what level of badge you bought. So keep track of that. But put in your bookmarks. And if you're going to GaryCon, come by. Say hi. I'd like it. And, I won't be in an empty room. So
Learn things.
Learn things, yeah. Also, I have an actual play coming up in February 5th, 7 p.m. over on the Input Theater. It is Lords of the Thorn, an actual play. I will be DMing and producing. There'll be VODs. It'll go up on YouTube as well afterwards. So please check that out starting February 5th at 7 p.m. It'll usually run about 2 hours. And I believe that's everything I have so far today.
Are you sure?
I am.
Have you gone through the full list?
My actual play Notion templates. That's the actual play producer panel, but let's do the templates. There.
Can confirm
if you use Notion. Can confirm what?
Yeah, templates are great because I was actually setting mine up for this Mass Effect actual play. So I was just like, oh yeah, DC had those, goes and finds them, starts filling it out. It was like, perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad people are getting use out of them. It always makes me happy to hear stories of people using them. Let's see, DMing and producing. So not much work then. I know, right? And just,
I can barely play in an actual play. I can't even imagine DMing and or producing. So respect for doing both at the same time.
I think I've been on only less than a handful of streams where I wasn't DMing and producing. No, that's not true. Because I was producer behind the scenes for a lot of streams. But if I'm on them, I'm usually not playing. I'm also DMing. So.
I remember all of the dessert themed one shots.
Yes, and there's another one coming, so it'll be great. I hope to do it in a month or two. So yeah.
Those were fun as a viewer. I say this as a viewer. Those were fun as a viewer. Quite entertaining. All the puns, all the references to food. There were clips made.
Lots of clips.
This is how. So many
all
clips.
Right. So many clips. All the clips. And by the way, if you want clips, and there's time slots open at Lady Luck 34. Higher.
I will say DC has actually hired me to do clipping and hopefully got all that you had hoped out of it.
I did. It was fantastic.
I mean, it was a really good one shot. So, that helps when there's a lot to
Oh,
work with.
yes. So this next one I have lined up. I'm just going to talk about it now. We're over time, but whatever. I'll let you go. Let you all go soon. I hope that I've upped the chaos, and it should be a lot of fun. So look for that in coming months. So I gotta get some more things together for it, but I think I have all the chaos in mind of what's happening, and I have ways to make it happen. So yay, we'll do that. So look forward to that too. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you once again at LadyLuck34 for being here and talking with me for a couple hours on this Tech Friday. It's been amazing and wonderful. Chaos, chaos,
Thank
chaos. Yes.
Yeah.
Use
Thank
the
you
emote.
for letting me. I'm like, let me talk to you about sewing things and how I try to make them happen on a stream with technology.
That's why I love people on. I try to uh, talk about things that you have an interest in. So there's, like passion, like, oh yeah, and I use this and this and this. And I just love hearing about these things. And it's great.
And then I break it all, and then we listen. Did I have to super glue some stuff with my camera because I did knock it over
Oh
enough
no.
times? Absolutely, I did. The little piece that fits in underneath so that you can actually screw it onto like a boom arm or a tripod
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
broke out because I knocked it over so many
Oh
times.
no.
And I was like, well, the camera's still working. It's literally just this piece. So if I super glue it in, I should still be able to attach it to things. Because if not, I don't quite know what to do besides like take a bunch of duct tape and
Mhm.
like duct tape it to a ring light. So it's fine. We didn't have to do that. But yes,
Excellent.
comedy, technology.
Use duct tape. Uh, duct tape helps. It's technology. So with that,
It's,
thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for spending time with us. And I will be back Monday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for more Sea of Stars. That's the game I'm playing. And appreciate being here. Have a great weekend, everybody. Please be kind to yourselves, be kind to others. And I will see you all on Monday. And check out Lady Luck stream on Sunday because it'll be great. So see you all later. Bye.